I'm going to now do what I promised. Which is to pull out some highlights from the reading for this week. Did you all have a chance to have a look at the reading? That was part 1, chapter 3, pages 33 to 49. And as I said, I'm not going to give a summary, but rather pull out some of the highlights for me. And as soon as I'm done, in about 15 minutes, I hope, then it's up to you to give me your complaints, your questions, your comments, and actually give each other, not only for me. The chapter, of course, begins with the concept of separability and situatedness as described by Paul Tillich, the great mid-century theologian and philosopher. And he noted, of course, that the two aspects of persons are distinguishable. We can talk about separability or individuality or uniqueness or singularity, and we can talk about our relationship. But they, in fact, in real people are not separable. We are all of these things at once. And such that only in the continuous encounter with other persons does the person become and remain a person. So although we are unique, we become who we are through our interactions. The unique character of each person develops through interactions. Yet those interactions occur only as each particular person could have them. And we know this from siblings, even from twins who have the same parents, and twins have the same DNA, and yet they interact differently with their parents, with their friends, with their teachers, with their environment, and so on. We have support from this from psychology, notably in attachment theory and the theories over the last half-century that have built on attachment theory. I'm just going to pick out a few for these highlights, one being Daniel Stern, who talks about the child's development having the core self, the self of each particular unique person, but also the core self within another. The core self develops in interaction with others. We also have support from evolutionary biology. Robert Trivers calls our wiring, our basic setup, reciprocal altruism, that we are not set up for aggression or competition, but wired as part of our evolutionary survival for reciprocal altruism. Dorothy Cheney and Robert Seyfarth write, natural selection appears to have favored individuals who are motivated to form long-term bonds per se, and not just bonds with kin. In other words, reciprocal altruism, cooperation, reciprocity is not only among family or clan members, but even groups who encounter each other only occasionally, and sometimes only in passing. Now, this had enormous survival advantages in our evolution, quite simply because if you have two clans encountering each other, if they fight in order to have access to the bison for meat, then they will kill a fair number of them off, and the survivors will have to try to kill the bison to eat with far fewer resources. However, if the two clans cooperate, then everybody gets to survive and everybody gets to eat. David Barish addresses the question of war and whether this is hardwired into our evolutionary DNA, into our biology, and he concludes that war is historically very recent. Remember that 95% of human evolution took place in the hunting-gathering stage prior to agriculture. War, David Barish suggests, is historically recent, highly erratic in distribution. Not all groups are as warlike as others, and what he calls a capacity. A capacity are derivative traits that are unlikely to have been selected for by natural selection, but have developed through cultural processes. They are neither universal nor mandatory. So war is a latecomer to our evolution, and we are not necessarily hardwired for it. And when we think of our reactions to war, that makes sense. If we were hardwired for war, if it was the way things were supposed to be, we wouldn't be outraged and upset when it happens. We're outraged and upset and feel that the fabric of our survival and societies are being destroyed precisely because it's not supposed to be that way. We experience it as a destruction and an exception because our more foundational wiring is for cooperation, not aggression. That's support from psychology a little bit and from evolutionary biology, and then we come to the ontological correlative. Now, last week, I said we're going to talk about how we're set up without God talk this week. So we're going to talk about it philosophically or ontologically. How are we humans set up to be? So we're going to start from the premise of our biology that we are distinct when we are relational. Now, how does that work out? We are distinct, but we become our distinct selves through manifold layers of relationships near and then extending out far. Let's see. Is that telling us that we need to do something creative to get the motion-sensitive lighting back on? Let's start philosophically from the idea that whatever makes everything also distinct, yet in relation. The source of being, the source of existence, of anything at all is quite different from particular beings. Whatever makes everything is quite different from what you as a particular being are. But nonetheless, something of that source of being must inhere in you, in everyone, in order for you to be at all. J. Gupta, building on Hegel, writes, anything comprehensible involves implicit and explicit structures of relation and interaction all the way down. There is no other way to be other than distinct, yet amid relation. That also means that every particular thing that exists is an example, an expression of the source foundation for everything. Whatever makes everything that is in you, I'm speaking metaphorically, is in you, inheres in you, for you to exist. That is expressed in all of us. So every person that exists is one possible expression of the ground for existence. One possible unique expression of the ground for all existence. Now, what is our relationship to this ground for existing at all? We are clearly not in direct or proportional relation. It's not that there's a force that makes everything and we are like that, only smaller. That's clearly not our relationship to the ground or reason for everything. In fact, we are analogically in relation. And we know what analogies are. We have two things. This is as this is to this. Yep, analogies are not the same in the way they appear, but they have an undergirding or basic of a kindness. So we are not the way one another. We are not like each other in the way, the details of the way we appear, and we are also not like the ground for all existence per se, directly. But we have an analogous of a kind, something of what it means to exist at all in us. And we call that the analogous participation. Ibn Sina, the great medieval philosopher, described this, Maimonides, the great medieval Jewish philosopher, and Thomas Aquinas, the great medieval Catholic philosopher, in one way or another, all talked about the analogy of being, or the analogical participation in whatever grounds everything. This is a case of non-identical repetition. We repeat analogously something of what it means to exist at all, but not identically. We repeat analogously, but in non-identical repetition. So let me move on. If we are in fact differentiated beings, yet in relationship to whatever makes anything exist, and also to each other, because that's what existence is, distinction with relation. If that's what we are, what happens when we don't have them together? What happens when, for one reason or another, we split off and get too much of one or too much of the other? Too much of our distinctiveness, our separability, our individuality on one side, or too much of our embeddedness or situatedness on the other.